with the rising and growing economy. Have a look at some of these numbers and let's start with something that we should keep with us and be very, very happy about, because after all, it's about us. It's about us, Bharat. As per the think tank Global Trade Research Initiative, India's foreign trade has now grown. Its crossed the 800 billion mark in the first 6 months of 2023. This is data until June 2023. Formal job creation is also growing as per the EPFO, and it has hit the 9-month high in June 2023. It's increased to about 10%. Also, the investment value of FPIs in Indian equities has also gained. It's a 20% gain to $626 billion in June 2023. And of course, the big story, within hours from now, we will all not just be hoping, praying, but we will also be counting down to those 15 minutes. By 4 p.m. tomorrow, ISRO will take a final call whether Chandrayaan is going to land on the 23rd of August at 6:04 and attempt that soft landing, or are they going to push it to the 27th? We are all rooting for the 23rd, aren't we? Chandrayaan 3 is the big story. Well, it's the countdown to touchdown for Chandrayaan 3 as it gears up for the soft landing. The Vikram lander module will be ready for that moon landing in just hours from now. India is all set to make lunar history, the dark side of the moon, the South Pole, the Atkins Basin. No other craft has gone there. The Russians attempted it, India attempted it before that. But will it be India landing there first? We'll have to wait and watch. The spacecraft that carries the hopes of not just the Indian Space Research Organization, but also of billions of Indians, and also the expectations of scientists, space researchers, and space adventurers worldwide. The landing on the 23rd of August at 6:04 p.m. It's the countdown to that fantastic touchdown we are expecting. Prayers Havan being conducted, everybody hoping for the best. ISRO confirming that all is on track, repeatedly sending out images of the dark side of the moon as the lander rover module moves towards that entire orbit, and that proximity, the closest point from where it will start attempting the landing. Government sources now revealed to News 18 that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is likely to virtually join the Chandrayaan team during the time when the landing is attempted. Mind you, he's at Brics, he's in South Africa at this point. But this touchdown on the surface of the moon, that too on the dark side at the South Pole, is something everybody is waiting for. First, let's tell you about the 42-day journey to the moon. The takeoff happened on the 14th of July. It began from Sriharikota and it was all done, practiced to the T, and went on smoothly. Milestone 1 was the 15th of July when the first orbit-raising maneuver happened. So as this entire Chandrayaan modules moved away from the Earth and trying with each elliptical orbit moving out and out and out, and finally slingshotting itself after milestone 2 on the 1st of August, inserted itself into the translunar orbit. And on the 5th of August, the lander propulsion module actually separated. It inserted into the lunar orbit, milestone 3. Milestone 4 was the in-orbit circularization phase. Milestone 5, we come to the lander propulsion module separating on the 17th, and then of course the deboosting maneuver that was completed on the 18th of August. So all these milestones have gone as planned. But there's the 15 minutes of terror. That's what scientists call it. The final 15 minutes, that is the descent onto the moon's surface. That will determine the success of the mission, because from a speed of about 1.68 kilometers per second, you got to reduce your speed to just about 2 meters per second. That's the deceleration That's where the 4 thrusters play a critical role. The lander begins the descent towards the moon. That's what the 15 minutes of terror. To move towards the moon at 6,000 kilometers per hour, ISRO will then give commands to the lander. The lander will then have its own computers that will do the calculation and figure out the deceleration. The thrusters will kick in. All four engines of the lander will be used. The speed will be reduced to just 2 meters per second. And the lander will be made vertical. So it's horizontal right now, it will become vertical and then land on its 4 strong legs, which have been made stronger in that final braking phase, to much stronger than before, to even wield a little bit more than 2 meters per second. So what is expected to happen on the 23rd of August at 6:04 p.m. if all goes according to plan? The Vikram lander carrying the Pragyan rover attempts the landing. That's what it will do. Then the attempt will be to soft land on the moon's south side at the South Pole, the big Atkins Basin, the biggest crater. Series of complex braking maneuvers will come into play. And of course, the lander will actually hover around for a bit to see if the surface is ideal. The sensors will send the message back into the computer and then it will choose the ideal place to land. Sans the boulders, sans too much of soft moon soil, and then figure out the most perfect available landing space. Rover named Pragyan will then roll out of the lander. Pragyan will explore the nearby lunar surface, the area, and it will gather images that will be sent back to Earth. It will also pick up samples which will take it back into the lander, which will then send those images of those samples and what's being collected. All that data will be sent back to our space station back and also in Karnataka, and then relayed to the ISRO headquarters. Chandrayaan 3 will explore the unexplored, the dark side of the moon. The possibility of water is in a larger area, in permanent shadow. That's why it's believed to have more water and ice and could hold 100 million tons of water. That's the possibility, because the dark side is not exposed to the elements, and that's why it could preserve how the Earth was billions of years ago, when this chunk of Earth separated from it and then became the Earth's own satellite, that is the moon. Frozen time capsule temperatures as low as -203 degrees centigrade on a moon night could contain preserved materials, insights into geological developments. There are so many aspects that will come to the fore because we have not known this at all. Untapped resources, traces of hydrogen, methane, it could hold sodium, mercury and silver, source of precious minerals, the original soil of the Earth, composition of it billions of years ago, the crust, mantle and core, we could know all of that. Future exploration aids coming up, and of course the upcoming lunar missions, ideal pit stop for Mars missions. So this is what India will sell to the world, that we've achieved this. And in what? In just our second attempt to land. Second attempt. This is not the first attempt by India. In 2019 too, India made a similar attempt. But what's the difference between then and now? Let's try and quickly compare and contrast Chandrayaan 2 with Chandrayaan 3. Chandrayaan 2 cost 978 crore because it also had the orbiter module in it. Chandrayaan 3 cost 615 crore. But it's equally heavy because the Pragyan rover and the Vikram lander have been made heavier, and they've been also packed with more features, more abilities. Chandrayaan 2 component, the orbiter, lander, rover. Chandrayaan 3 component, the propulsion module, lander and rover. Chandrayaan 2 payloads were 14. Chandrayaan 3 payloads were, total number is 7. Lesser number but equally 3.9 tons. Chandrayaan 2 days to the moon took 48. Chandrayaan 3 days to the moon is 42. Chandrayaan 2 contained 1 camera to detect hazards. Chandrayaan 3 contains 2 cameras to be more robust. It also has added features. The Pragyan rover has added solar panels. Chandrayaan 2 landing site is a high plane between 2 craters. Chandrayaan 3, the landing site is slightly off the Chandrayaan 2 site. So not too much variation as far as the landing site is concerned. Then Chandrayaan also sets the ball rolling for India's next big mission, that is Gaganyaan, further on into space and also sending a human being into space. First manned mission into space. 3 crew members in space for 3 to 4 days. The mission to a 400-kilometer low Earth orbit, splash down in Indian waters. And then, fourth nation to launch a crewed spacecraft after, of course, US, Russia and China. But India was not the only one in the race. Russia also launched a moon mission and they tried to race it. That was the lunar mission, but it failed. August 11, Russia launched the Luna 25. Attempt was to soft land on the same side of the moon that India is attempting. August 21st, it was expected to reach the South Pole, but the spacecraft crashed on the moon. Deviation of actual parameters. Device switched to an off design orbit. That's what happened. So when all of these aspects happened, Russia was disappointed. But it was nearly after 5.5 decades that they were attempting it. It's not that Russia has not landed successfully on the moon. But 5.5 decades later, how could they make a mistake? What is the difference between Luna 25 and Chandrayaan 3? Chandrayaan 3 and Chandrayaan 2. Who better to ask and converse and understand than a former ISRO chief himself? Listen in to what G. Madhavan Nair had to say when he spoke with me a short while ago.
G. Madhavan Nair ji, we are starting. Thank you very much, sir. Namaskaram. We are all counting down. I think it's just a few hours, but the all-important moment. And this time around, there seems to be not just hope, but belief that we will get the soft landing right.
Well, certainly a lot of efforts have gone behind this mission. After the Chandrayaan 2, ISRO has done a considerable amount of changes in their design and in strengthening the subsystems like the thrusters, landing legs and computer software and all those things. And a large number of simulations and validation also has been done. So there is every chance, there's an extremely good chance that we'll be able to achieve the mission this time.
One question that I'm very curious about is that none of the other space-bound nations like China, Russia, or America in the past, Russia attempted it now, have looked at the dark side of the moon. Why has India chosen the Atkins Basin or the South Pole?
Well, there are two reasons. One is, the presence of large quantity of water is confirmed in the southern pole. So in the future, if we want to have some robotic colony or even human presence, the South Pole is ideal location. The second, since it's the dark side and there is not much of disturbance happening with respect to time, we may get some idea about the origin of the moon and the condition of the planet Earth when the moon spun off from the Earth and so on. So the data what we get will be throwing some light on the basic principles behind the origin of the planet Earth itself. And again, whether we can confirm the presence of helium-3 and other exotic minerals there, that will be an opportunity for us. So this is a very important mission as far as India is concerned. We have some data from the remote observation from the Chandrayaan 1 and Chandrayaan 2. This is an opportunity to validate in situ that information. More than that, the technology demonstration with respect to soft landing on a faraway territory where there is no beacon, there is no GPS, nothing. It has to be done autonomously using the self-contained instrumentation, the cameras, the altimeters, and so on. So this is really going to be the cutting edge of technology. And once we demonstrate that, we'll be showing to the world that we are in par with the Western world as far as the high technology is concerned.
But Russians also quite ambitious with Luna. If you were to contrast Luna and Chandrayaan 3, because many people are curious where Luna failed, why do you think Chandrayaan 3 or why do we think Chandrayaan 3 will succeed?
Well, we don't have much information about the Luna failure, but Russia has done this 50 years back, and it was really surprising that they got into a problem this time. One thing is, the approaching the moon, there are many uncertainties. The gravitational field around the moon, even the thruster calibration, the orbital calibration, etc. Russians did it pretty fast, but as far as the ISRO is concerned, they are taking a very cautious approach, going step by step. So that approach may have a better chance of success than compared to the Russian one.
ISRO says at exactly 2 hours prior to the scheduled landing, they will take a final call. If not, they will even postpone the landing to the 27th. Can you explain that to us, please?
Certainly, I think that is a very right thing for ISRO to do, because it's a very precious mission and we can't afford to take any risk. We have to ensure that everything, both on board as well as the ground, works to the perfection, to the satisfaction of whatever targets what you have set. Then only we can give the final command for the soft landing. So naturally, the 2 hours before, ISRO chairman will be taking a call and then deciding on the further course of action.
How is the Vikram Ranger better than the last time around? We're given to understand from 5, they brought it down to 4 thrusters, but you had mentioned that the lander has stronger legs. It's more robust. What are the kind of changes? Does it also have an autopilot mode where the lander itself can take over away from ground control in those 15 minutes of the landing?
No, this last 15 minutes of operation is all autonomous with the computer taking control in the lander module itself. It is imagine a situation, an aircraft will have to land on a field where there are no beacons, no radars, and it's only the terrain pictures are available. So we are in similar situation, and also even the type of the environment which you face there, especially the gravitational field and things like that, there is no precise knowledge. So this mission with the onboard, the measurements are very, very important. The first, of course, the optical measurement from the stereoscopic camera. Then there is a laser imaging system as well as a Doppler, which gives the position as well as velocity indications. There are gyroscopes and accelerometers to decide whether the thrusters are working or not. Then the control system to stabilize the attitude, the orientation of the module, so that at various phases it is pointing in the right direction, and ultimately the legs are pointing down. And the ultimate challenge is in finding a spot where there is not much of problems of collision. See, for example, if there are some boulders are there or some craters are there, they are danger spots. So the onboard camera will have to analyze that zone and take a decision. So it will be hovering around the low altitude and taking pictures. And once it is satisfied, the onboard computer gets satisfied that is the right location, it will give the command for final dropping to the surface. So this is an extremely complex operation, and every element has to work perfectly.
G. Madhavan Nair ji, my final question. How confident are you that we'll nail those 15 minutes?
Well, I think the space is full of challenges, and we have challenges several times. And hard work, which is put in by the ISRO team, even the God will not deny them the success.
Let's hope that, and that's the prayer, sir. Thank you so much for speaking with us. Always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Namaskaram. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shifting focus from Chandrayaan to yet another big move by Bharat. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is attending the 15th Brics summit in Johannesburg. Ahead of his departure, Prime Minister said the Brics has become a platform for discussing the challenges faced by the global south. Now, why is India very clearly wanting to champion the voice of the global south? And the moment India has increased the amplification, other nations have jumped onto it too. One, it has the political will to lead the global south. Secondly, the rise in stature as far as the international sphere is concerned, prominent position in international politics, because the economic rise of Bharat as a nation over the last, at least in the last decade, plays a role in mitigating global crisis situations, serves as a bridge between the north and the south. And this is something that India has actively worked on, and it's also played a critical role in providing vaccines during the pandemic. When other nations shunned the lesser nations, the smaller nations, the global south, India reached out. More than 6.5 crore vaccines were given, ladies and gentlemen. 650 million plus vaccines were given. Significant advancement in digital payments like UPI. We are partnering with more than 50 nations to help them adopt this entire digital infrastructure. economic prospects in improvement in social indicators, making significant advances in the fight against terrorism, and last but not the least, a powerful counterbalance to one of the hegemonic rises or hegemonic entities in this region, that is the East, if you were to see, that is China. There are many nations that have also felt the brunt or been burnt by deciding or trying to remain only dependent on China as a source. But now everybody is looking at China plus one or anywhere but China. So these are thought processes. But in this entire global game, the hegemonistic nations which continue to hold the veto in the UN Security Council, India has said that it will use Brics to add on many other nations. The expansion of Brics is also there. Ashok K. Kantha, the former Indian ambassador to China, is with us. Aina Tang, in political affairs commentator, also with us. Namaste. Thank you very much for your time and your patience. We are expecting the Prime Minister to also speak 10 minutes and he'll be followed by President Xi Jinping. But Ambassador Kantha, I wanted to understand what's changed in the last decade and a half as far as India is concerned. Has India always championed the cause of the global south, or is this something that we have started building now? And the expansion, 20 nations want to be part of BRICS. And this is not even an organized entity. It was a coinage that was made by an agency, news agency, and then it became an acronym for these nations, BRIC to BRICS, when South Africa got added. So today, where are we?
First thing which has happened that nature of BRICS had changed. The international environment in which BRICS operates had changed. Our focus on concerns of global south has been there all along. In fact, even during the period we're active in online movement, that was a major preoccupation for us. So that hasn't changed. But you will recall that when BRIC was set up in 2006, even earlier when Jim O'Neill of Goldman Sachs came up with this acronym, there was this assessment that these 4 countries will become dominant economies come 2050. Later, South Africa joined. That hasn't quite panned out. The economic trajectory of some of the member countries hasn't quite kept pace with potential. But from our side, we have tried to keep the focus on economic issues. We supported setting up of a new development bank or BRICS Bank, which was in fact an initiative mooted by India, though it's now headquartered in Shanghai. We also supported, contingent reserve arrangements. Focus was primarily of concern of developing and emerging economies. Today, it's changing somewhat. China in particular wishes to give a more geopolitical orientation to BRICS. If you look at the speech delivered by President Xi Jinping at the virtual summit hosted by China last year, there was a barely veiled attack on US-led Western countries, criticism of bloc politics, and seeking BRICS countries to support each other's core interests, though that doesn't quite gel in with China's behavior on some other issues, including what's happening along the borders. He sought support for China's global security initiative, which again has a very strong geopolitical agenda. So I think one important theme that we need to pursue, what is going to be character of BRICS down the road. From our side, I think we should continue to ensure that the original perspective of pursuing interests of emerging developing economies is kept in mind, and it doesn't get sucked into great power rivalry as a sort of instrument of Chinese foreign policy.
Right.
That's one. Coming to the issue of expansion of BRICS, this is something we need to move ahead with a degree of caution. India has not opposed expansion. At the same time, would like any such new members to come on board through a very clear process of norms and parameters which need to be defined. Equally important, we must ensure that BRICS as an institution is consolidated. And before we start adding too many new members, for instance, the issue of representation of developing countries in UN Security Council. We expect China and Russia to support 3 other member countries of Brics in terms of aspirations to join the UN Security Council. So I think we have to maintain focus on those issues rather than getting excessively engaged on the issue of expansion at this stage.
Right. So 20 nations have shown their willingness, but you're saying within these 5 member nations, let the 2 ones who have got a permanent seat in the UN Security Council help the other 3 get in there. Einar
Exactly.
Tangen, let me just get in Mr. Einar Tangen. Einar Tangen, how would you look at BRICS, or how does China actually view BRICS? Because one common agenda between nations, despite strategic differences, is that all the nations, this is a grouping which wants to battle Western hegemony. President Putin has spoken about it, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken about it, President Xi Jinping has spoken about it, that we need to break the hegemonistic shackles. Neo-colonialism has to be broken up.
Yeah, the unipolar world is gone. I mean, BRICS is a testament to the fact that it is a multipolar world. The question is, how do countries relate to each other? Before, for instance, you needed to know about your country, maybe a few neighbors, but then only the US. Today, with the complex trade relations, countries have to know other countries and respect them. So China has been putting forward this idea of a civilization, security and development initiatives, basically aspirational, not saying that anybody can impose anything, not saying that these are the only things that can be discussed, simply that here are middle power countries who are now shouldering the responsibility of trying to guide the world in the absence of the G7 and their inability to come forward, even to keep promises. $100 billion a year that was supposed to go to climate change has not materialized, only 1/10 of it. And much of that money has gone to companies that seem very much connected to the first world. So at this juncture, these 5 nations have a huge responsibility, but they cannot let the G7 countries who profited from the global South through colonialism off the hook. I think that's the desire of many G7 countries. They can just say, well, if you have problems, go to BRICS, let them solve it. The fact is, the majority of wealth is in these countries, and they are the ones responsible for so many of the actions. So I think this is a consensus point among the 5 countries, that they have to have a more global perspective.
But what is China's point of view? Would China want to work with the BRICS nations closely, try and sort out issues with these nations? Because all the nations which are part of BRICS also have a huge engagement with the Western powers, Ambassador Kantha. So how do you balance this, and where does India work this? Because India is engaging very strongly with the United States. Our relationships perhaps are the strongest ever. In the meantime, we continue to engage with Russia, and we are looking forward to this bilateral that could happen post Galwan on the sidelines of BRICS between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping.
I know you rightly pointed out that India has a very important relationship with the USA and other Western countries, and we are very clear that we would not like BRICS to be hijacked to become a platform for bashing the West. That will be not in our interest. We are very clear about it. So agenda of BRICS has to be defined very clearly. The nature of BRICS should not be changed to become a geopolitical instrument. There are concerns which are shared. We have, for instance, similar positions on the issue of climate action or food security or energy security. These are issues where we can work together. We can work together on restructuring of debt for developing countries, including our neighborhood in Sri Lanka, for instance. I think we need to focus on these practical priorities. We need to further reinforce New Development Bank, which has done quite well during the years it has been around. But its resource base needs to be reinforced further, and we can likewise find practical initiatives which will provide relevance to BRICS. Otherwise, no, BRICS will be seen as an organization, chasing an acronym. It shouldn't be like that.
No, but Mr. Tangen, do you see a change in the position of China, of the CCP? Is there going to be some level of dialing it down with India in terms of adversarial positions and engaging more as a friendly neighbor and equal partner, given the economic rise of India?
Well, I don't think the economic rise of India is the issue or any of the things that you've talked about. China's, from its perspective, has held its hand open. They see it differently. They see India being the aggressor. Both sides do. There's no point going over that. The issue is, how do you go forward? And how do countries work together? China has proposed a Westphalian peace, e.g., what goes on in your country is your business. What goes on in their country is theirs. Rather than trying to fight ideological wars, they suggest that people engage in peaceful development, that countries be secure, and that there has to be a deep respect for the very different civilizations that have existed and are existing throughout the world. In terms of how China will deal with India, let's hope that this bilateral, which appears like it's going to happen, will be the first of many breakthrough points, which will allow these two Asian giants to get along, not govern each other, simply have a consensus on how they can work together. Remember, the BRICS represents a consensus entity. It is unlike the UN, which is much more of a corporatism. This idea that if you have the majority, you make the rules. This is no longer the way it works.
But Ambassador Kantha, it's the same BRICS nations, the two nations who have still not allowed a permanent seat for its partners. So
exactly,
it's the left hand says something, the right hand does something else.
It's time that our partner countries in BRICS should walk the talk. When we talk about respecting each other's core interests, it should also translate into respecting each other's aspirations. And there is clear expectation on part of India, Brazil and South Africa that China and Russia will be supportive of India's our membership of UN Security Council, restructured Security Council. That's not happening. So I think while we don't bring our bilateral differences with China into plurilateral arrangements like BRICS or SCO, you would have seen that we have gone ahead with our engagement with these groupings very proactively, despite very serious differences on the bilateral track with China. But the fact remains that at some point of time, difficulties in our relations with China do seep into our collaboration with China in multilateral platforms as well.
Right, Ambassador Kantha and Aina Tangen, thank you very, very much. We're standing by for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's address at the BRICS summit that should come forth in a short while from now. He's also supposed to engage with the Indian diaspora. But quickly moving on, ladies and gentlemen, to explain to you why this multinational trip is important. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi visits Greece on the 25th of August, after the BRICS summit, while returning from that summit in South Africa, it will be the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Greece in 40 years. Indira Gandhi was the last Indian Prime Minister to visit Greece in 1983. In fact, in the last year or so, PM Modi has made it a point to visit nations not visited by Indian Prime Ministers for decades. Now, let's try and tell you how Prime Minister Narendra Modi's diplomacy emphasizes a vision of India becoming a Vishwamitra or a friend of the world. Government sources revealed to News 18 that Prime Minister Modi's trips to nations often overlooked in traditional diplomatic circuits comes with several purposes. First is the aim to strengthen bilateral ties, get support from these nations, get them on your side, get them to understand that we are with them and get India into their sphere of understanding and increase this bilateral engagement, exploring areas of mutual interest and cooperation, helps in institutionalizing deliverables. Now, let's also tell you how Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit is also helping India. Why these visits are helping us? Government sources reveal that PM state visits are making India a formidable force because more and more nations are turning towards us and we are getting into their consideration set, into their radar, fostering new partnerships and support where it counts, builds the backing at various forums like the United Nations, WTO, very critical, benefiting from expertise of other nations, ties with nations that feel neglected, reshaping India's global outreach, and we are finding friends where we were not looking. That's the important aspect. Positioning India as a global leader and as a nation that cares for others. And we are also now getting visuals from the Brics forum. PM Narendra Modi has already arrived there. We are expecting, these are live visuals that we're just cutting across to, and in a short while from now, we should have the addresses of the heads of state. It's running a little behind schedule, ladies and gentlemen, about a half an hour to 30 minutes behind schedule, half an hour to 40 minutes behind schedule. That's why this entire Brics schedule is running so far. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is supposed to speak or scheduled to speak after we have the Russian President's video conference address, that is Vladimir Putin. Now, let's also quickly tell you about the various nations that PM Narendra Modi has gone to as part of his state visits to attend multilateral events. So let's quickly look at this. Africa. So one of the nations he visited was the first visit by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the African continent was to Egypt. Then invoking sharp colonial stories and colonial memories. India, Africa, sharing common India-Africa nations, that's what. So sharing common challenges, so that's where the aspect. So where all did he go to? He went to Kenya, Mozambique, Rwanda, Seychelles, Tanzania, Uganda, and of course to Egypt. And this was the first time that he completed and visited all these nations in 26 years. Now, he also invoked the shared colonial histories and also views that Africa nations are a partner in economic growth. Then he went to South America and countries in South America. Prime Minister Narendra Modi visited South American nations like Argentina, Brazil, who are major traders and investment partners of India, and also is viewed as a collaborator in global forums like Brics. Central Asia, PM Narendra Modi visited Uzbekistan thrice, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan twice, and highlighting the importance that needs to be given to these erstwhile Soviet republics who are now part of Central Asia and important components of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Also, East Asia, apart from visiting Japan and China multiple times, PM Narendra Modi visited smaller Eastern Asian nations, also Vietnam and Laos. PM also wooed nations affected by Chinese aggression and engaged with them. In the entire Oceania region, PM Narendra Modi surprised many when he visited Fiji and Papua New Guinea. And during his visit to Papua New Guinea, the PM there actually bowed and as a mark of respect to touch PM Narendra Modi's feet, bringing back the cultural ethos and the shared cultural ethos. So these are aspects of PM Narendra Modi that stand out and perhaps highlight the reason why he's engaging with these nations and how they are going to get Bharat the important support, especially on forums like WTO, where every vote counts. Every word added in every paragraph, under every clause, makes a difference as far as trade agreements are concerned. And you need help. And also on forums like UN, where you're pushing for reforms in that 75-year-old organization, saying that you are ignoring some of the biggest democracies in the world and some of the most vibrant nations who are contributing to the world's growth, because the scenario has changed since post-Second World War to 2020. That is the 21st century. These are visuals coming in from the Brics Summit. PM Narendra Modi is seated there. You can spot him amongst some of the heads of state. But it looks like these are the opening addresses. What we're going to do is, ladies and gentlemen, take a very, very short break. When we come back, we should have Prime Minister Narendra Modi speaking at the Brics Summit. Stay with us.
Co-powered by Particularly because Pragyananda has beaten Magnus Carlsen in previous events, and actually that's how he shot to fame in India as well. But before I get to that, after his semi-final win last evening, Pragyananda talked about how it's his defensive skills that have been saving him. He almost said that, he's been on the verge of losing a lot of these games, but somehow he sticks it out. What have you made of his journey so far and his chances in the final?
Look, chess is like many sports. You don't win only by the great moves. You win by the games you don't lose. Every half point plucked here and there adds to your score. So Pragyananda has done an amazing job. I would go further. Since June this year, he has played 3 events. He's played the Global Chess League, he played a tournament in Hungary, and now he's playing the FIDE World Cup. In all 3 events, he's playing unlike the Pragyananda even of that we knew before, who was already one of the world's best juniors and one of the world's most promising talents. But in these 3 tournaments, he's raised his level enormously. But Carlsen is playing at one of his best levels too. So it's going to be challenging. Now, Pragyananda needed to rely on his defensive skills a lot against Caruana yesterday, because Caruana is one of the best players in the world, one of the best prepared players in the world, in openings especially. So Prag had to survive a lot of difficult positions, but he's been much more all-round. He beat Arjun, he beat some other players in the World Cup with his attacking skills. So he's been drawing from multiple skills as well. But he will be sorely tested by Carlsen, make no doubt about it.
Do you think some of his previous wins against Carlsen will make a difference, mentally at least, for this 18-year-old? Because this is a humongous stage for him. The first final he's made. In fact, a measure of his growth is from the fact that in the last World Cup, he was eliminated in the 4th round. And this time, he's beaten the world number 2 and 3 en route to setting the date with the world number 1. Do you think it would help him that he has faced Magnus Carlsen multiple times before and has actually won against him, even though this would be a different stage?
Yes, it would help a lot. Definitely, knowing that somebody has resigned against you once, that you've done it once, you know that it's possible. A lot of people, when they play Magnus, they're not even sure what is possible. But he knows that he can do it. But equally, he knows how strong Magnus is. So, but that's something to draw from. I've done this before. When an opportunity arises, I've punished him before. And as much as Prag knows it, I think Magnus knows it as well. So his Magnus will be just a little bit wary thanks to those wins. These things always help.
Yes, actually Magnus Carlsen said after one of Pragyananda's previous victories that we all want to be like him. So this young 18-year-old boy has a lot of fans even amongst his peers, if I can call them that. Just the journey that Pragyananda has had is enormous.
Yes, very much. He has a lot of fans, and somehow people like calling him Prag, and they like looking at that name and thinking, what's going on here? I can add that there was a joke that he's a new Indian, but he's still got Anand in his name.
Oh.
So, but anyway, he's actually very popular. He has many fans, and most of the top players think of him very warmly as well. On top of that, you only have to see his mother and his sister, and you root for the whole family. It's very touching.
Absolutely. Anand, I did want to touch upon the fact that you talked about Magnus Carlsen, that you've punished him in the past, but you did lose your World Chess Championship title to Magnus Carlsen. Have you first of all spoken to Prag at all and shared any tips or any kinds of words of encouragement?
We have discussed Carlsen on multiple occasions, of course.
Yeah.
But I haven't been talking to him much during this World Cup. When I was in Baku, I spoke to him a few times. But mostly, a chess player at this moment is in their own bubble. And I'm not sure what it would do to him. And by the way, it's not like his journey here was predestined. So in every match, I thought, my God, he must be nervous. I'm not going to get close. I think he has a support system. He depends on his mother and perhaps his sister to say the right things at the right time. If he reaches out to me, of course, I'll help him. But he's very focused, and I respect that right now.
Yes.
But through, even in our time at the West Prajanand Academy, I've interacted with him a lot, given him a lot of tips. But this is not the time to butt in.
I understand that. I do want to ask you, this is not just about what happens between the years or on the 64 squares. When you're playing such championships, it's a lot else that also matters. From your experience, what is that one thing that is truly crucial for somebody in Pragyananda's shoes tonight, apart from his game?
Pragyananda's level is high enough, and right now it's very high. So if you don't take his actual rating, but his performance rating, the clip he's performing at, it's much higher. And therefore, the difference between him and Magnus is not purely technical. I mean, certainly Magnus has great technical skills. The difference will be mental. Can he be tenacious like he has shown before? Can he take opportunities when they come up? Can he simply sit there and make good moves, one after the other, without his judgment wavering? It will be mental. What happens today and tomorrow will be mental. It won't be their chess abilities. That both of them, it's high enough.
Yes. So how did someone like you prepare? Just give us an idea what really transpires.
The world is rooting for this boy, Pragyananda, our very own, who just turned 18th on the 10th of August 2023, right through the middle of the World Cup, the FIDE World Cup. Interestingly, the man he is up against, Magnus Carlsen, became champion or won the World Cup back in April 2004. Prag was born a year and 4 months later, on the 10th of August 2005. Now look where he's come. The first game today between Pragyananda and Magnus Carlsen ended in a draw after 35 moves. Magnus will be playing white tomorrow, the second classical game. It was Pragyananda who made a c4 opening with white today, and it was supposed to be he was the aggressor till that 27-minute gap break that Magnus Carlsen took, and thereafter he came back to play faster than Prag, and it was Prag who was eventually racing against the clock, but eventually it's a draw. Let's listen into what D. Gukesh, one of the four Indian quarterfinalists at this World Cup. He lost in the quarterfinals, but D. Gukesh also becomes India number 1. September 1, when the rankings come through, he would have dethroned Vishwanathan Anand, who sat as India number 1 for 37 long years, nearly 4 decades, ladies and gentlemen. I spoke with D. Gukesh while this first match of the final was going on. Listen into what he had to say.
Gukesh, hi, thank you for speaking with us. Congratulations. First up, you're India number 1. You're breaking into the top 10 in the September rankings. But bowing out of the World Cup must have been disappointing in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, it was overall a nice experience for me. I played quite well. But yeah, this one game, the first game against Magnus was played below my level, and he was in his top form. So that was a disappointing game. But yeah, it was a good learning experience for me for sure.
What did you mean by saying that the name of the game is intimidation? I saw a post which talked about tactics, mind games. Do you think that comes into play at the big stage when you play with these players?
Well, for me, the first few times I faced the top players, it was a nervous experience because I wasn't really used to it. But now I regularly face the top players, so I'm not especially nervous. And mind games, it doesn't affect me much. I know it exists, but it's not a huge concern for me.
You've beaten Magnus in this year itself.
Mm-hmm.
So how was he different at this tournament?
I mean, he's always great. He's the greatest. He's probably the greatest of all time. And the games I've beaten him were in faster time controls. The classical games that we played, we played 4 games, and it was 3 were draws and 1 loss. So, I mean, in faster time controls, I've beaten him once or twice. He has beaten me several times. So he's still clearly the better player. And yeah, in classical chess, in the World Cup, we got a position where he really excels. And he clearly outplayed me.
There were 4 Indians in the quarterfinals. There is 1 Indian in the final right now. Are you guys fierce competitors but also good friends? Are you rooting for each other when you're not competing against each other?
We are surely friends, but also we are rivals. We are both, and we try to maintain a healthy relationship. We compete fiercely on the board, and after the game, we are good friends again.
After nearly 4 decades of Vishwanathan Anand, the one name that we associated with men's chess, how does that feel at the age of 17 to become India number 1?
It's a nice moment for sure. But also, I need to mention that we are in different phases of our career, and of course, I'm nowhere close to achieving Vishesa's level of greatness. So, still a long way to go. But I'm happy with this moment.
How do you assess Pragnananda's performance, especially after the quarterfinals? In the semis, he took it into the time area, 3 draws, and now in the final against Magnus.
For sure, he's a great player, and he's having good results recently. Yeah, World Cup was a very nice performance for sure.
But what's the secret to beating Magnus Carlsen? He's somewhere he was, perhaps the people thought he's lost his mojo, he's lost his motivation, but he's come back different this time. What is the secret to beating him?
I mean, if there is some known secret, then I surely don't know it yet. But I guess the main things you need to do are just play your game, give your best, and hope for the best, because he's clearly the greatest right now, and probably one of the greatest of all time. So you just have to try and give your best and see how it goes.
Tell me, is it a very docile sport? Because many believe chess also, even though it's a board game, there is a lot of intimidation, there's a lot of gamesmanship, there's a lot of trying to put your opponent into a discomfort. Is it all true? Like Magnus came just 1 second to go on the clock for the final to get underway. Now, is it all part of certain tactics which players use?
Yeah, I think chess is very psychological. If you're not in the right state of mind, it's very hard to play. So surely people try to put pressure on the board and also mentally. And about Magnus coming late in specific, I think it's not sure if it's like he does it on purpose, but what I heard is that he just finds it easier to focus without all the noise around him before the game. So he prefers to come late. And yeah, there are some players who do play some mind games, but I guess at this level people are kind of used to it, and people are able to get their right state of mind more easily, no matter what the opponent does.
Does the world now take Indian chess players seriously? You see a certain level of respect going up, saying player from India, we can't underestimate.
I think it has been the case for a few years already. I mean, maybe more than a few years, starting from Vishy sir. I mean, everyone takes Vishy sir, like, has a lot of respect for Vishy sir. And after Vishy sir, there was not maybe such a huge boom in chess, and with the latest talents coming up, I think we have a lot of respect, and I can and people openly say that they.
Well, that's what people openly say, that we'd rather stay clear of the Indian players because they look like underdogs, but they're very sharp. But this is some message that another pesky neighbor needs to get, ladies and gentlemen. Just doesn't get it, that we are sharp and we are going to push them back. But they still keep coming at us. Pakistan continues to foment trouble and quickly covering ground here because this is what happened in the last 24 hours across the LOC. An infiltration bid was spoiled. This happened because terrors terrorists are trying to make an entry back into our soil. Our security forces killed 2 terrorists along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir's Poonch district. Forces recovered arms and ammunition from the spot. Now, how this happened, let's try and understand that. Intelligence inputs were received from multiple intelligence agencies in Jammu Kashmir and Jammu Kashmir police revealed that the presence of terrorists who were waiting to cross the LOC from the Balakot sector. Now, based on these inputs, own surveillance grid was placed on very high alert. Multiple ambushes were sighted at suitable locations by the forces. As the terrorists approached India's ambush sites, they were challenged and then engaged with effective fire. 2 terrorists were gunned down by the forces in this entire encounter. During the searches, AK-47 rifles with 2 magazines, 30 rounds, 2 grenades and Pak origin medicines were also found. There has been a sharp decline in terror-related activities, but more importantly, is this hurting the enemy? And at a time when the military is quasi-controlling the Pak government there, are these activities only increasing, both overt and covert? No stone pelting reported, drop in terror activities, record surge in tourism, infrastructure boost, increased connectivity, successful G20 summit, ease of doing business, 5th largest economy, equal rights to citizens, global stature, goodwill being increased. More importantly, India is becoming powerful, rising day by day. Pakistan hurtling towards penury, economic hardship, and of course being treated like a global pariah. Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow ORF, joins us. Sushantji, namaste, Jai Hind. Thank you for joining us. Albeit on a little bit of a tight notice here, but I quickly just want to ask you, Sushantji, if I may, this Mushal Malik move, the infiltration bid, and all of this just around the time a caretaker government and the Prime Minister, the caretaker PM, are clearly hand-in-glove man with the ISI and the military establishment. Should we read all of this in conjunction?
I think quite clearly the signaling from Pakistan, even the appointment of Mushal Malik, who's known to be an old ISI, person with very close links. In fact, not just her entire family. They are one of those entrepreneurs who have made a lot of money by, peddling this nonsense on Kashmir, and perhaps a marriage to Yasin Malik also had something to do with it. But appointing her was a demonstration of intention by the Pakistani deep state on how they are going to proceed with India. The kind of statements which are coming out from Asim Munir and this new government doesn't signal that there's going to be any change from the past. And in fact, even their foreign minister, who himself has been found to be involved in financing of terror activity in India, has made one of those typical pro forma statements that yes, we want good relations, but it has to be on the issue of Kashmir. So there's basically been no change from the Pakistani side. And Anand, the fact is that the deeper the troubles that the Pakistanis get into, I think the greater will be the incentive for the Pakistani military establishment to try and finger India a little bit, to try and notch up tensions with India, because that they hope will start uniting an otherwise deeply divided country, and also convey a message to India that they are still in the fray. What hurts the Pakistanis the most is that India simply has stopped talking about Pakistan now. At the official level, nobody talks about them. They are ignored. Nobody bothers anymore, except for some, past their sell-by date Congress people who write books and preach that good relations with Pakistan is what will lead India to greatness, which is utter nonsense. But other than that, I think at the official level, everybody in India is ignoring Pakistan, and the Pakistanis can't handle it. For them, the way India is ignoring Pakistan is something which hurts them very deeply, hurts their ego, hurts whatever delusions they had about themselves. And now we are frying bigger fish, so nobody really bothers about Pakistan anymore. So I think that is also hurting them, and they want to show that they remain relevant.
Right.
But having said this, I think the incident which happened last night, there is a little more to it than meets the eye. I think from the Pakistani side, they tried to cover it up by saying that there was a violation of the ceasefire. From the Indian side, we've said we've stopped an infiltration attempt. I think it was more than stopping an infiltration attempt. There are some reports that we actually crossed into the LOC and hit.
Although it's
some
been
of the
rejected.
terrorists who were waiting to infiltrate. And from the Pakistani side, they don't want to admit it, so they are trying to cover it up. But clearly, the fact that they allowed these guys to regroup means that they want to keep the pot on the simmer and show that they remain in the fray, and that India should not think that they've given us a walkover, which they have in many ways, because frankly, the Kashmir story is over as far as Pakistan is concerned.
Sushantji, thank you very much for your comment and your insight. Thank you very much. I've got to wind up the right stand on that note. Over to Zaka for Brass Tacks.
Good evening. It's one small step for lander Vikram, but a giant leap for India. Those are the words which we are all, 1 billion plus of us, hoping to hear tomorrow at a little past 6 o'clock in the evening as the Chandrayaan 3 moon mission makes a soft landing on the south side of the moon. It is indeed a historic moment. It will ISRO prove its ability that it can compete with the very best in the world in space technology. Will it prove to be third time lucky for the Chandrayaan 3 mission? Now, particularly so because just a couple of days ago, you saw the lunar 25